Hi, I'm Robert Ferguson, and helping me show you how to conduct body measurements correctly is my good friend Casey Ritchie. So we're going to walk through this, and I'm just going to give you a ton of information, and this video is always available for you to remind yourself of the proper way to take measurements. One, when you're taking measurements with someone, you want them to dress in a way where the clothing isn't too loose. You want it to be somewhat form-fitting, so you can tell people that. Because if someone's wearing a dress and you're going to go to do a tape measure of their thigh, now you're reaching up under their dress, and that could have some people not feel very comfortable with that. So share with people, maybe wear jeans, something that's form-fitting so that you can conduct the measurements without them feeling uncomfortable. Next thing is you want to make sure you have a measuring tape that's long. This is 120 inches. The reason for that is that in my past, I've taken measurements of people where I went to do the hips, and a 60-inch measuring tape didn't work. It didn't make it all the way around. So you never want to be caught or positioned to where that happens. The next thing is I'm going to work my way from the bottom, and I'm going to work my way up with measurements. And whenever I'm doing measurements, I do the best I can to do it in a private area. Meaning you don't want to be getting someone's measurements and saying out loud so that everybody in the room can hear, or wherever you're doing this can hear what their measurements are. And the last thing is, if you can get an assistant to work with you, that's ideal, because you'll have someone who can be standing there as you do the measurement. They can write down the number. Then you can get it done really, really fast. Otherwise, you're going to do the measurement or two, and then you got to write it down. Do a measurement or two, and you got to write it down. You start trying to do like 3 measurements in a row, you go back to write it down and you forget. That's not a good thing. It could take forever. So ideally, have someone helping you, be in a private area where you can move really fast, or if you're doing like a challenge or a big group session, it's okay to do measurements, but do the scale weight in a private area. Do the measurements, and the person who's helping you is close enough to where you're not yelling out what their measurements are. Makes sense, right? Yes. Okay, so when you're doing measurements, I'm going to ask Casey to face toward the camera, and I want her feet to be about hip wide, if not as wide as her shoulders. And then you want to instruct them to face that way and keep your weight 50% on each foot. So you want to be balanced out even. And then at this point, you can let your hands drop down. And I'm going to start with the right calf. And so I go off to the side. You don't want to do measurements like facing them, okay, or like totally behind them. Get off to the side, and as I drop down to one knee, I'm going to go to the widest part of the calf. Now you can't see this, but you can see the important part. So I'm at the widest part, and when I come off to the side, I'm going to level it off so it's even. And right here, she's 14, what I call 13.8. Okay, so it's not quite 14. So 13.8, and at that point, it overlaps perfectly, and it's not one of those things where you're going like this. You don't want to do measurements like that. Okay, let me show you. You never want to go across like that. You want it to be wide and even. See how that lines up there? So we're 13.8, and that's the right calf. So if I had someone helping me out, I'll say 13.8, and they're following me. And then from there, I would just go straight up to the thigh. Now from the thigh, I'm going to look at the glutes, and I'm going to, right where the glute comes in, so I want to go to the widest part of the thigh. And the feet you want wider. Sometimes I may ask them to go a little wider on the step, depending on their size, because you don't want their thighs rubbing, right? So I'm going to go here, and I go straight up, and then at that point, the widest part, and I'm going to get that measurement, and for her, it's 22. But I want to show you what this looks like from the side. So if you don't mind, Casey, I want you to face that way, and then bring your left foot, scoot back over this way. Perfect. So I'm going to come right here. So as you can see her glutes, and this is the widest part of the thigh here. So I'm not going to be on the glutes. I'm going to be off to the side, and again, I would go straight up, the widest part, and then I would overlap it. So at that point, we have the measurement. Someone would write it down, so I got 1, I got 2. Now while I'm down here, I'm going to jump right over to the other side. Now you may decide that at this point, it would be to your benefit to just work your way up to the hips. So I'm going to show you from the hips. You go to the peak of the glutes, and you're even all the way around, and then that would be the measurement there. That's 39.5. But I don't go in that order. So it's totally up to you how it works best for you. Because once I hit the hips, then I like to be up on my feet so I can go straight to the waist. So at this point, I would go over to the other calf, and again, I would get off to the side. So go ahead and follow me the best you can. Go ahead and turn back to the camera. So imagine if I was down here and I completed this area. Then I would work my way over to the other side, and I would do this calf the exact same way. I would work up and do this thigh. And at that point, those are both done. Now, once I'm here, depending on the person, I would go around, because now I got the bottom part of her body. I would go up, off to the side, and I would do her hip. So I want to keep the flow going. And once I work the hip here, and I give the number, let's say it's 40 inches, then I would go up, go ahead and lift your arms up, and at this point I'm behind her. And then I would ask, can you take the tape measure for a woman, and let's place it 1 inch above the belly button. Could you do that? And once you do that, then go ahead and let your arms drop, keep your weight balanced on each leg, and then I would do the measurement, and we're at 30.0, so 30 inches. Is that a good thing? Or
I want it to be under 30.
And then once I've done, and I'm going to come back to this because it depends on the size of the person, how you measure the waist.
That one.
Let's go ahead and now we're going to go to the chest. So the chest for a woman or a man, we're going to go to the peak of the chest. So go ahead and grab the tape measure, and she's going to place it. And then once you place it, just go let your arms drop, and I bring it to the backside, and we're at 37.8, and that would be that measurement. And if I was still working with Casey, at this point, I would ask her to lift her chin up, and she has hair, and I would oftentimes say, I'm going to touch your neck, or even earlier, I didn't do this, but let me remind you, before you touch their leg, say, do you mind me touching your leg to do the measurement? Get their permission instead of just touching their leg. But I'm going to go around, and we're going to get the neck measurement right from the back, 13 inches. And now I've worked the entire, from the calf all the way up to the neck, and then I'm going to work my way to the arms. However, let me kind of go back, depending on the size. Now with Casey out, it was pretty easy for me to get my arms and the measuring tape around her body. But let's imagine that her hips are over 70 inches, over 60 inches. What I would do, because I can do the legs, and sometimes you have them go a little wider, at this point I would say, can you take this and like a belt, bring it around your body? And then she would give it to me. I would take it from this side. And at that point, I would go off to the side, drop down, and then I would be able to work and get her hip measurement. And then from here, hanging on to the measuring tape, I would then go back to the backside and ask her, could you grab the tape measure, bring it up about 1 inch above your belly button. And if you're not sure where it is, depending on the size of the person, you just kind of, you do this a little bit. And then it'll go right in place. And at that point, you have them keep their weight even, their arms are relaxed to the side, and you can do the measurement. If it's a guy, you want to go to the peak of the belly, or 1 inch below the belly button. And then you had that measurement.
Does it say 29 this time?
So I can tell her it says 29. So now go ahead and move a step over to your left. So now so once I've worked from the neck, we got all of that. Now we need to get the arm. So I would start with the right arm straight out to the side. And sometimes people will get the arms first, just to get the person to be a little bit more comfortable. Instead of going right to the leg, they'll do the right arm and then the left arm and then go to the leg. So you can go in that. That's another way of doing it. But I'm going to go right above the bone there. We're going to get this measurement, and we're at a 6.5. And while the arm is up, I'm going to go to the widest part of the forearm. I'm going to get that measurement, 9.5. And while the arm is still up, I'm going to go to the widest part of the bicep, get this measurement. And you don't want to squeeze too tight on the tape measure. You want to just kind of bring it to the form of the arm. We're at 12 inches. That would be like the distance between the elbow and the shoulder. That would give me the bicep. The widest part of the forearm is the forearm, and then we get the wrist. and then I would work the other side. And remind them it's okay to bring the arm down when you're done. And at that point, you've done all their measurements. You can get the measurements done in less than 2 minutes if you have someone helping you. So instead of having, say, 2 people doing measurements on 2 different people, it's easier, faster if it's one person doing the measurements, the other person is writing down. Give them back the sheet, they put it in their folder, and they're done. You got their weight, you got their measurements, and then keep track of the people who do the measurements. Because if I do your measurements, and let's say a month goes by, and I'm not here to do her measurements, someone else does the measurements, they may be a little different in how they measure. So the results may not be as consistent. So you want to reduce the likelihood of that happening, and the same person who does the measurements in the beginning should do the measurements throughout the whole program. The same as whatever scale you get on in the beginning, that's the scale that you check your weight on. That's the scale that counts. You don't want to be going from different scales. That doesn't help anything. And that's how you do measurements. I believe I got it all handled. If you have any questions, we do provide everyone who's following the program and taking measurements with a written form of how to take the proper measurements. And at the same time, you can always contact us at the office for clarity so that you have more confidence in taking measurements. So thank you, Casey, for your time. Thank the cameraman for his time. And I want to say thank you guys for your time. Watch this as often as you want so that you have full clarity on how to take measurements. And always think about the person and how they're feeling before you take any measurement. Make them feel as comfortable as possible, and don't yell out their measurements. They want to keep that private. Okay, thank you.